The man stood alone beneath the lights, shoulders slightly bent not from weakness but from time itself, as if the years had gently pressed their weight upon him without ever breaking his spirit. 80 years lived, 80 years endured, and in all that time, his voice had remained locked away like a letter never sent. The room did not know it yet, but history was about to exhale. He held the microphone with hands that had worked fields, fixed machines, wiped tears, and folded themselves in prayer more times than anyone could count. Those hands trembled, not with fear, but with the gravity of the moment. When someone waits a lifetime to speak, or in this case to sing, silence becomes sacred. The audience shifted, unaware that the next few minutes would quietly rearrange something deep inside them. His name hardly mattered now. Names belonged to records and paperwork, but what stood before them was a life. A life that had known war sirens instead of lullabies, hunger instead of abundance, and responsibility long before childhood had finished. He had been a boy when the world was burning, when dreams were postponed because survival came first. Singing was not forbidden, but it was unnecessary in a world where bread mattered more than melody. As a child, he sang only in his head. Soft tunes followed him as he walked behind his father, as his mother hummed while cooking thin soup for too many mouths. Music lived in him quietly, respectfully, never demanding attention. When his father died young, the songs retreated even further, curling into a corner of his heart where hope was stored for someday. Someday is a dangerous word, it can last a lifetime. He married young, not for romance but for partnership. Life required two people pulling in the same direction. Children came, work came, responsibilities stacked themselves like bricks until there was no visible sky left between them. His voice, strong and warm even then, was used to teach, to scold gently, to reassure. Singing felt like an indulgence meant for other people, people with time. Years passed the way they always do, quietly, then all at once. His children grew, left, returned, then left again. His wife aged beside him, her hair turning silver like moonlight on water. She was the only one who ever truly heard him sing. Late at night, when the world slept and regrets grew louder, he would hum softly beside her. She never asked why he didn't sing for others. She knew. Love understands without interrogation. Then one winter, she was gone. Grief changes sound. It hollowed him, echoing through rooms that suddenly felt too large. Silence became his constant companion, heavier than loneliness. For months, he barely spoke. But something strange happened in that quiet. His voice returned to him, not as memory, but as necessity. Singing became a way to breathe again, to speak to someone who was no longer there but never truly absent. At a local community center, someone suggested an open performance night. He laughed at first, a short, disbelieving sound. 80-year-old men did not step onto stages. They watched from chairs, clapped politely, went home early. But that night, alone with his reflection, he realized there was nothing left to protect. Fear loses its power when time has already taken everything else. So he signed up. Now, under the lights, he closed his eyes. The room was restless, people expecting novelty, not truth. Some smiled kindly, the way people do when they don't expect to be moved. Others checked their phones. Youth is impatient with age, not out of cruelty, but ignorance. He inhaled. The first note left him slowly, like a confession. It was not loud, not dramatic, but it was alive. The sound carried weight, shaped by decades of unsung emotion. It did not ask for attention, it commanded stillness. Conversations died mid-breath. Phones lowered. Spines straightened. By the second line, the room had changed temperature. His voice was not perfect in the technical sense, there were cracks, edges softened by age, but it was devastatingly honest. Every syllable carried a life lived fully, imperfectly, bravely. He sang of love not as fantasy, but as labor. Of loss not as tragedy, but as proof that something precious had existed. People began to feel something they couldn't name. It was not sadness alone, nor joy, but recognition. His voice sounded like memory. Like grandparents' kitchens. Like letters never written and apologies never spoken. It sounded like time. A woman in the front row pressed her hand to her mouth, tears spilling without warning. A man who had come only to accompany his daughter found his jaw clenched, eyes burning. Even the children sensed it, fidgeting less, watching with unfamiliar reverence. This was not a performance, it was a reckoning. He did not look at the audience. He sang inward, to the boy he had been, to the man he had become, to the woman he had loved and lost. Each note was an act of courage delayed but not denied. 80 years of waiting poured out, not bitter, but tender. When the final note faded, it did not disappear. It hovered, suspended in the air like breath held too long. No one clapped. No one moved. The room was frozen, not by shock, but by respect. Silence had never felt so full. Then, somewhere in the back, a single clap. It sounded almost rude against the quiet, but it broke the spell just enough for the world to resume. Applause followed, not explosive, but rising, steady, overwhelming. People stood without realizing they were standing. Tears were wiped without shame. He opened his eyes, confused for a moment, as if waking from a dream. He bowed slightly, not from pride, but gratitude. Gratitude that he had lived long enough to be heard. Afterward, strangers approached him with shaking voices. They thanked him for reminding them that it is never too late. That dreams do not expire, they wait. One young man admitted he had given up on music because life felt too heavy. An older woman held his hands and said she wished her husband had lived long enough to do what he just did. He smiled, gently, knowingly. He did not feel brave. He felt relieved. That night, walking home under a sky scattered with indifferent stars, he felt lighter than he had in decades. Not because he had sung well, but because he had finally answered himself.